Hi, I'm Jim Crawford, Business Development Manager at BTL, and I'm going to be talking through some of the things which I discussed in my presentation at e-assessment tomorrow, which was entitled High Stakes Testing on Tablet Devices. So broadly speaking, I covered four main areas, or four main problems which we came up against when we introduced our tablet delivery application for Surpass. And those areas are changing technological landscapes, unsuitable user interaction, security, perhaps the biggest one, the unknown. So let's start with changing technological landscape. There's so many tablets on the market, and there are many types of the same tablet, different shapes and sizes. And by this time next year, we know that they'll probably all have changed again. But really, there's only two big players in the market. We know that. We know it's Apple and Google. So there's two main operating systems, iOS and Android. Now, the big difference between tablets and PCs from an operating system point of view is that when a new operating system is released, most tablet users, they tend to take it fairly quickly. You know, they see it pop up, new update ready to take, and they'll select OK. Now, with PCs, we know that just doesn't happen. When a new major release of Windows comes out, it's very rarely taken straight away. In fact, there's a lot of institutions who will just completely skip releases. So the problem here with regards to summative testing occurs when you're updating your operating system on your tablet, but you're not getting an updated version of the application. And this obviously applies to any tablet application, but in this scenario we're talking about our Surpass tablet delivery application. If that's not been updated at the same time as the operating system being updated, you're going to get some incompatibility issues. So how did we solve this? I'm going to focus on iPads here, but basically it's the same process for Androids. So firstly, what we advise is if you're using these tablets for high-stakes delivery, just turn off auto-update, which should be the default. And secondly, when an update does get released, you don't necessarily have to take it straight away. So just wait for us. It's a very simple solution, I know, but we want to just have the opportunity to do any final testing and make sure that there's no issues introduced with the new operating system before we can confidently say, okay, now you guys can go ahead and take it. So what we do with the Surpass Delivery app is we ensure now that every development we do is constantly tested against both the current operating system and the beta version of the next operating system that's due to be released. Because Apple give us access to that beta version months and months before it goes to market. So we have more than enough lead time to fix any issues that are introduced on the new version. Then once Apple do send out that update, we can then just provide that extra level of reassurance that once it's gone out, no new issues have been introduced, and we can let you know, okay, now you're fine to upgrade. Okay, so the second one we wanted to look at was unsuitable user interaction. Okay, so there's a few people who've talked specifically about how keyboard pop-ups on tablets are very distracting. Secondly, they can take up way too much space, obscuring the majority of the question and answer area. So it becomes quite hard to actually read what you're trying to respond to. And also for open responses, for essay responses, it's just not a great medium for doing that. Touch typing is very difficult, and it can be quite tedious to type long responses. Again, all true, and we agree with that. But as a company that specialises in summative assessment, I can tell you that collectively, whilst a lot of our partners do some really innovative content with advanced question types and simulations and animations and all sorts, over 90% of all the content used in Surpass is multiple choice, which is perfect for tablets. So while we do understand this issue, it doesn't necessarily have to be an issue unless you absolutely need to use those advanced question types or other question types that aren't as suitable. So if you do need to use them, what can you do? There is a couple of options available to you. First of all, Bluetooth keyboards, although they can still have their own usability issues if they're not full QWERTY size for touch typists. Secondly, another aspect that you may want to consider is with the native keyboards that you get in tablets, they provide spell checker or spelling assistant by default. So if you are assessing a candidate's ability to spell correctly, then that's not really going to be an option for you. However, what we've done now is we've built our own custom keyboard, which we package within the Surpass Delivery application. So when you download it, you get a keyboard which we've designed but does lock down that spelling assistant and allow you to use a keyboard that's not going to provide spelling tips to the candidate. So the next issue we've got is security, and this for us really is the key issue because we specialise in high stakes testing, and this has to be, as a technology provider, our primary concern. So with PCs, we've created a well-known application, the Secure Client, that locks down the computer and ensures that the candidate can't access anything else. They can't access the internet, they can't access other applications, and in fact, if the internet goes, they can continue using the Secure Client because it will store the candidate's responses locally in an encrypted format. Now, you can still do this with tablets. It just requires a little bit more work because you can't do it from the application itself. You have to get access to the tablet so that you can set it up to run in something called guided access mode on iPads or restricted access mode on Android devices. So this means going into the tablet and activating the correct security settings, but it doesn't mean you necessarily have to do it for every single tablet. You can manage this through something called Mobile Device Manager or equivalent third-party software, so that you're managing the security of all of your tablets that are being used for summative assessment from a single device. So if you are running your device locked down in guided access, for example, we still provide that 256-bit encryption, so the exam content is still heavily encrypted and secure. We still provide the ability for the candidate response to be saved locally to the device, so you're not reliant on an internet connection to be present, and you're obviously still locking down the environment so that they can't access the internet or other applications. So you get the exact same level of security which you get with the Secure Client, which is being used to deliver tens of thousands of concurrent exams. So that brings us on to our final area which we looked at, and that is the unknown. And that's the scariest part of everything, because in summative assessment, it's something which we know, working in technology, it's very hard to innovate because it's a very high risk environment. You need tried and tested solutions. And so there's always this exaggerated fear in this particular industry. And that's why we're very thankful to a lot of our partners who really sort of push the boundaries and pioneer in this area. So what are the unknowns from your point of view? What do you need to think about with tablets that you've not previously had to think about with PCs or with paper-based assessment? So maybe battery life is one of those areas, or aging batteries on tablets. So we know that a new battery on an iPad lasts somewhere around the 8 to 10 hours mark. That's for the more modern iPads. And with pretty moderate use of that device, you'd need to buy a new battery maybe every 2-3 years, which still works out quite a bit cheaper than a laptop. Alternatively, you can buy a portable charger, so you don't need batteries at all. Or even better, you can plug it in. There's this kind of assumption that if you're doing an exam on tablets, then it has to be completely mobile, not plugged in. Of course, you can still just plug in your tablets, and then you're not reliant on batteries at all. So another aspect of the unknown, which I don't know if this applies to everyone, but I've been asked what happens if the candidate drops the tablet and it breaks during an actual exam. So there's obviously, that's the possibility. It can happen. Unlikely, I think, but there's a few things you can do to mitigate against this. First of all, you can buy a stand, so the candidate isn't necessarily inclined to pick up the device when they're responding during the test. They're answering it whilst it sits on a stand on the table. Secondly, you would be very surprised how tough modern tablets are, and especially if you put them in a case, they're pretty durable. It's very hard to completely break them simply from a small drop off a table. So they're kind of all my counter arguments to those four main areas, or those four main questions of why wouldn't you do summative assessments on tablets. The next thing which I want to kind of just briefly cover is the other side, which is why would you? These are the reasons, the counter arguments to why wouldn't you. What are the reasons for actually using tablets? So we have some really nice quotes from our customers because they're in a better position to answer this question, really. This was Saeed at AAT. We must recognise and adapt to the emergence of technology as well as the shifts in user behaviours. Delivering assessments via the use of mobile technology removes logistical barriers through making assessments more accessible to learners across the world. This, coupled with emerging technologies such as online invigilation, makes for a very different and exciting future assessments landscape. So for me, I think the key line here, I mean, you could probably analyse the whole of that passage I've just read, and it would be full of very interesting things we could reflect on. But the one I want to focus on now is the removing of logistical barriers. So that can be applied to a lot of different scenarios, particularly with regards to delivering into regions which have got very weak technological infrastructure. Okay, this next quote is from Martin Lauder at the British Council. He said, "We feel that having a test centre in a box made up of 20 tablets, which charge while they're in the box, as well as Bluetooth keyboards and headphones, will provide a very interesting value proposition for educational institutions. This will help us get around the issue that computer labs are often busy during school time and they can't be used for the testing of students or teachers. The test centre in a box model will allow us to pre-download a number of tests onto the tablets and deliver them into the school for them to use in a space of their choice at a time when they choose and without the need for the internet." So again, this is all about flexibility. If you've got those iPads on site with the exam downloaded in advance, you don't need to wait for the computer lab to be free. You can just turn any room into a summative testing environment. And these boxes really are great. You can carry, 8, 12, 16, 20 iPads in a box. And as Martin said, it's charging those iPads at the same time. And by adding the Bluetooth keyboards and headphones, it's helping them to overcome some of the usability issues we also discussed. So finally, Graham Clark from SQA told us this: "We are committed to ensuring that assessment is as accessible as possible for all learners and centres. We see the use of the tablet app as having the greatest impact in the schools and vocational education sectors where use of tablets and other devices for learning is increasingly commonplace. Use of the Surpass app in addition to their existing web delivery method will increasingly help learners to see assessment as a natural extension of their learning experience." So again, as with the previous passages, we could probably analyse all sorts of aspects of that, but I'm just going to focus on that last point, which is help learners to see assessment as a natural extension of their learning experience. For years, I've heard and made the pro e-assessment argument that tests should be done on PCs because that's what students learn on, and ultimately it's what they're probably going to be using once they're qualified throughout their career. But reading that last statement from Graham, it did make me start thinking, well, actually, are tablets now more commonplace than PCs for modern day students? And doing some research around this, I found some pretty interesting statistics. So right now, 1 in 3 5 to 15-year-olds have their own tablet. Okay, so that's not have access to in the classroom or at home through their parents or whatever. It means they own their own, and that was done by that was research conducted by Ofqual at the end of last year, and that's apparently doubled from the year before. So previously it was 1 in 6 5 to 15-year-olds. Now it's 1 in 3. So they certainly are increasing in usage. They're being used to do a lot of internet surfing and gaming, as we already know. But as tablets are increasing in processing power, we're actually seeing hybrid laptop and tablet devices becoming a lot more commonplace in the modern workforce. So I think you probably could start making the argument that tablets are now the most fit for purpose testing medium for examinations, because that is what the modern student is using. Okay, so that's basically everything which I covered in my presentation. If you have any questions or you want to know a little bit more about the Surpass delivery application, by all means drop us an email at info@btl.com. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening.